Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious on June 10th, 2025. And we've got an interesting show on one of the most clandestine operations the National Reconnaissance Organization ever did back in the 60s that never flew. Our green screen here is, when we look over here, the MOL Laboratory, the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. And uh, a very interesting chapter of American space history, along with, I think, the dinosaur, one or two man vehicle that was going to be like uh, a space jet, and it was never came to fruition. No, a lot of money was spent on it, as was this program, and about a half a dozen astronauts that segued into the Gemini and Apollo program. Actually, the Apollo programs where they segued into the shuttle program. All of them is really what I want to say. So glad that you're watching today. We were trying to effort ESA astronaut Marcus Want, and that didn't happen today, but I was prepared to do either show, this one being the backup. So not many slides that I get to put together. It's one of those shows that, I wish I had a whole day to prepare for, because as I dug deeper into it, I found more about the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, but including a National Reconnaissance Organization website that had just like 50 photos on it. And you Google it, it's kind of hard to show, hard to find all except the pictures, maybe the pictures I'm going to show you here. So glad that Jubilee's watching, and Steve Jokem's up in Fox Lake. He and I are happy that Formula One racing's in Canada. A great track up there, the Villeneuve track up there. And so you'll be enjoying that along with me, Steve. Dave Stange says hello. Gary Gerald, Robert Law. And Marty, why don't you pan over here so we can have Tom Celentano wave at the crowd here. Tom, sit up straight there, young man, and wave at everybody there. There's Tom in the flesh there, outside our door of our confidence. And thank you, Tom, for being like so many of these other people, loyal viewers of Stay Curious. And you found us very early that we talked to you there. And so there's Tom. And when you talk to him, now you got the face to the person you're talking to, as we have happily created a wonderful uh, social, sometimes hour, lots of times just 40 minutes to an hour. Can't believe I talked an hour yesterday about the Cocoa Beach 100th anniversary and I Dream of Jeannie and all that good stuff that goes with Cocoa Beach. So if you didn't watch that show, please check that out. So, of course, Tom Celentano, like many of you, are here to see the launch. Oh yeah, Marty, you're gonna turn that on there for him. Move that monitor in front of me a little bit. Pick that up and put that on the marks on the floor. I moved that out of the way, and I like that a little bit closer so I can see what I'm talking about there. So, so like I said, Tom Celentano. What town you live in Connecticut? Hammond? Hamden. Hamden. Originally from where?
Originally from New Haven. Now I'm in
Okay, New Haven up there. Chris Callie lives in Fairfield, I think, is where Chris is from. Fairfield or Ridgefield?
Richfield last.
Yeah, Ridgefield, I think it is. And he might be watching and correct me there. And Dave Stange say he saw the flown capsule while on tour at Kennedy a few years ago. Interesting to see the hatch cut out and the heat shield. And you're going to see that there. And there is my good buddy, Mr. Chris Callie. And thank you for your dad's book, Chris. Marty and I were looking at it today, just in awe of Chris's dad, Paul Callie, who was renowned in our space community for his great work, including the Apollo moon landing stamp that we've all got in a junk drawer somewhere, probably laying around. But Mr. Paul Callie was just phenomenal with trappers of the West and Indians and so forth. So go check that out there. And Tommy Usiak saying hello to you, Tom. And he enjoyed chatting with me and Marty today on the phone. And we've got an announcement about him and his little brother Mark that you can hear them on a podcast on Thursday. And we'll talk about that here at the end of the show. But like we mentioned, Tom, you and so many people are here with bated breath, hoping that we get this crew off tomorrow at 8 a.m. And if they don't get it off tomorrow, it'll march back to about 7, a quarter till 8, something like that. So I'll be getting up early and coming over to Spaceview Park and seeing the TV stations and so forth that'll be watching it from there. Many of you have seen a rocket launch just 3 blocks away from where we're sitting, and we're actually about 10 miles away from Pad 39A, where the Falcon 9 in a brand new Crew Dragon are poised to go to space. This is the 5th Crew Dragon that Elon Musk has built. And this is the 12th, I think this is the 13th human flight on those other 4 Dragons. And so I'm always a little edgy on a maiden flight, Marty. But man, just seeing how the shuttle maiden flights went off without a hitch. Still a lot of engineering going into the first flight of any spacecraft. And you have got Peggy Whitson there, the most experienced woman ever on any continent to go to space. She has got 675 days in space. She'll be up there for 10 to 18 days, depending on what they're doing up there. But what they want to do is Axiom wants to start building a space station attached to the International Space Station. We've talked about it before. There's 4 modules planned, and then they want to put a power factory on it, of solar panels, and then move away from the International Space Station, which I just pray that they do before the International Space Station has to be deorbited. So, because Elon Musk and the politics going on with Mr. Musk and the Trump administration, he may have 5 spaceships all dressed up and no place to go, is what could happen there. But we've got our ESA support people here on the Space Coast for the Polish astronomer there. And I can't even, I was going to try to pronounce his name here. Where do I have that at? I'll try it. They call him Slawez is his first name. And his last name is Wazinski. And it's his first flight. Peggy on her 5th flight is there with 3 rookies. And we learned from our ESA friends that were on Friday. If you didn't catch that show, you want to go see it. Luca and Sergio. Sergio is a program manager that puts the whole mission together and then hands it off to the trainer that was Luca to train the astronauts. And Tom, he asked me if I heard about Peggy time. And I go, Peggy time? What are you talking about, Peggy time? Yeah, Peggy Whitson time. We joke about it in a serious way. She's worked with Peggy on these other missions. She was Axiom 2 commander. She gets stuff done ahead of time. And growing up on a pig farm in Iowa, I could see those disciplines have gone down, have just been layered in her DNA. Though I never heard other astronauts talk about Peggy time. And Sergio, who puts the programs together, says, oh yeah, we'd have a project for 3 hours with an experiment or whatever going on in the space station. And once she got up there and started implementing that program, she would call down about 90 minutes or 2 hours into the 3-hour time frame and say, I'm done. What do you want me to do now? What can I do tomorrow to get ahead of everything? And that's Peggy time. She's always pushing her crew to get everything done ahead of time. And maybe that's a smart thing to do, because maybe you got more time to kick your heels back in that cupola and look at the Earth flying beneath you there. But Peggy Whitson and crew, Godspeed tomorrow's liftoff. It was delayed from today because of high winds in the upper atmosphere. It might not be pushing a blade of grass down here, the wind, but once you get about a mile up in the atmosphere, we know that there's a lot of kind of rivers of air flowing around that could rock that crew capsule around on that Falcon 9 a little bit. So we did get to see a launch this morning, right, Tom? Yeah, beautiful launch up there where I saw it from my driveway, and man, it went right in front of the sun. I couldn't watch much of it there. Another group of Starlink satellites going up to populate low Earth orbit. So good luck to them. Dave Stange, bonus if you're watching, the first stage will be returning. Yes, the LZ-1 tomorrow. Certainly will be. And in that sonic boom of it coming back, it takes so, you see it land, and it'll take over a full minute for that sonic boom to reach us on there. So we hope everything goes right with them on this maiden flight of the 5th Crew Dragon that so far is unnamed. But if it's named, I know Steve Jokums will tell me what the name is, okay? And I want to say hello to Marty over there running the board. Marty, thank you for everything that you do. He is going to hopefully be giving a tour to Marcus Wendt, Axiom 3 astronaut, tomorrow out at the Space Center. So good luck with that, and hope that happens. Well, let's get into a little bit of space history here as we're looking at the artist rendering of a Gemini spacecraft attached to a module. Of course, it's just a tube that they put a lot of instrumentation in. But as you look at this a little bit differently, you're all familiar with the Gemini spacecraft. And how were the astronauts going to get inside this laboratory? Well, they were going to go through a hole in the reentry shield that they were going to a plug, basically, that they would pull out and get in there. And this was tested on November 3rd. I got the date here. 1966 is when that single flight was tested. And then they reflew it again to prove that the heat shield would work on there. But look at the orange thing on the side. That ain't a salt shaker, for their food. That is a high-end reconnaissance camera and solar panels to be attached to that. Not sure how they would withstand the launch going up there. That's a detail I haven't looked out. And I just doing a little Googling around, and I found a National Reconnaissance Organization declassified page for the mole, and my gosh, it has about 50 pictures on it. But you got to click each one to see what you're talking about. So you better know that I'll do that, and one day do a really in-depth on this, as there's some really cool astronauts in the shuttle program that actually train for this mission. So you got a open bay there of other radar, maybe an antenna to try to listen to people talking. After all, this was spy versus spy in the 1960s when this was developed against the Cold War with our adversaries that are now our friends in space, the Russians. Let me put my glasses on here. This was the successor to the canceled Boeing X-20 Dinosaur military reconnaissance plane. That it was envisioned we would have a whole fleet of aircraft that were single-seaters that would be launched on a Titan rocket. This all was to be launched on a Titan rocket, and this was going to be the second stage. The Titan, of course, the hypergolic fueled rocket that launched the 10 Gemini missions to space up there. Another artist concept of it shows you some more of an elaborate scenario, taking it to the next level. This is actually just a space station that may have been developed after the mole for reconnaissance. I particularly like the astronaut at the open hatch there with a lasso or whatever he has on there. But in the 1960s, the concepts were very rich on what we would do in outer space, from permanent space stations for civilian vacations to reconnaissance from outer space. Breakdown of the mole. You've got the main cabin there where the astronauts would live. It actually had a toilet that I saw a picture of here about an hour ago. Looked just like your toilet in your house, in fact, by the way. They were really pressured to figure out how to make that work. Of course, no toilets ever went to space until the shuttle era. They used a defecation bag that they just with tape basically attached to your butt. A lovely thought, isn't it? The auxiliary cabin may have been where some of the high-tech reconnaissance things were. You had an experimental module, then you had the equipment module, and then the trans stage was what would push them around into space up there. So um, we got Amy Collins on here, and she, of course, has jumped ahead here. Yes, the advancing technology did basically put the mole out of business, and as did so many advancing things in the front uh, in the space program. Once transistor circuit boards were created, it was a whole new ball game to make things smaller, lighter, and more efficient, and not risk the lives of humans in outer space. Still, billions of dollars were spent on this program. As the 1960s progressed, the Vietnam War competed with the Manned Orbiting Laboratory for funds, and also the Apollo program, all right, was in parallel with the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. But it was canceled on this date, June 10th, 1969, without any crewed missions being flown, just a month before the manned landing of Apollo 11. So we're talking 56 years ago when this was a big dream and a group of astronauts were involved in it. The NASA spacesuits were derived from mole suits that were built by, I got that, Hamilton Standard, built the environmental control system. Honeywell built the attitude control. Pratt and Whitney had electrical power. IBM data management. Okay, and Douglas was the other of five major contractors. Aerospace Corp being the fifth one there. Let's see. Its technical superiority was UNIVAC. Remember the computer named UNIVAC, built for $230 million in today's money, and this was a new, as Apollo was going on, and this actually started in about 1961 or two, before some of the Mercury flights were flown, the development of this, and it was a good test bed of how to bring so many contractors together to do different things in space there. So again, another detail of the spacecraft itself. This is a real cool graphic there to show you some of the other concepts of it there. In the upper left-hand corner is the Manned Orbiting Laboratory patch that we'll see up close. Mole KH-10, codenamed Dorian, all right? Now, this eventually was replaced by KH, and I don't know the number, but the nickname was Big Bird, okay? And I've actually seen a replica of that at the Smithsonian Udvar-Hazy. I guess that'd be about 4 years ago, Marty. We took a trip there. A road trip I'll never forget, Marty. That was really a wonderful time that we had in Washington, D.C. those few days in there. And so a lot of thinking going into this, that this would be a decade-old project. It would really rattle the cage of the Russians and even Chinese communist countries as to that we were spying on them. And they were talking about, a resolution of a couple feet. Mole would be in a 150-mile orbit. The main camera had a field of view of 9,000 feet across, but in its top magnification was, they think, something about 30 feet across, with a resolution of 9 meters, which was really outstanding then. And then the spy satellites that replaced them could basically see a pack of cigarettes if you had one in your hand. And now today's satellites can probably see a lit cigarette in your mouth. For those of you that, just an analogy, don't smoke, not advocating that. Okay. The main camera would focus on the most important targets, providing very high resolution that was classified, and they would aim at the most interesting part of the target. But it's going 17,500 miles an hour. The recordings of it was on film, okay? And we also had the U-2 spacecraft that was being flown. And one of the pilots of a U-2 spacecraft, if you didn't know, is Roger Chaffee, one of the youngest of the U-2 pilots. And Roger lost his life in the Apollo 1 fire, of course, and we'd just been an unreal astronaut at the time. So they had simulators developed for this, a laboratory module. They trained in some things on there. Pilots were given scuba diving in Key West at the underwater swimmer school, and all kinds of things going on. And the schedule was that in April '69 they were going to launch a qualification unmanned flight. The second uncrewed Gemini B would be qualified in July '69, and then in December '69 a crew of 2 would command and spend 30 days in orbit. There you go. They wanted to have it 30 days in orbit up there. And then December, then 5 months later in April, a second crewed mission. July, a third crewed mission, 1970. October 1970, a fourth crewed mission for up to 60 days. And that was going to be an all-Navy crew of either Richard Truly and either Bob Crippen or Bob Overmeyer. And then in January '71 was the fifth crewed mission. Okay, so this thing was very developed, and like the dinosaur, was quickly had the funding jerked out from under it. And when it did happen on June 10th, 1969, the reconnaissance agency said that everything would be given to the Apollo so that they could catch up with things. Of course, in the early 1960s, we had the Corona spy spacecraft that were spy satellites that ejected out their film and was caught by parachute in midair and brought down. And that was one of the other fascinating things I got to see at the Smithsonian, was an actual Corona spacecraft. It's only about, only about 5 feet across. And the film, I was interested in the film, and it kind of looked like 120 film there, Tommy Usiak, that we used in our Hasselblad cameras, and going through all the rollers and so forth to be exposed and then rewound up for a safe reentry. And they just, after then, they developed, I'd say, the transistorization of everything, put a nix on all this. So there is the crew patch. And we like looking at patches. I couldn't really find anything about this. Man Orbiting Laboratory, United States Air Force, flight crew. And if you got one of these babies, they're worth at least $500 all day long. There you see an astronaut's face profiled on the left with the Earth latitude and longitude lines on that. The vector going around it, and the astronaut symbol slicing through the back there. So very simple patch, yet boy, if you've got one of these, let your family know, because it's worth a lot more than the $5 that they probably sold them for at the gift shop in there, if they did that. Again, another concept view of the orbiting laboratory in 1969 by McDonald, the Gemini B. We've talked a lot about different Gemini spacecraft. They actually wanted to put a trunk on the back that could have held 4 astronauts going up. And for the life of me, Marty, we're living in the 2025, and Russia's Soyuz spacecraft first flew in 1968, I think, maybe 67. Soyuz 1, where Komarov lost his life, and it is still being flown, almost 50 years later. They'll have the 50th anniversary of the Soyuz spacecraft in a couple years. And I wish we'd kept the Apollo command module active till now. It would have made a great emergency vehicle. You didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They could have configured it for 5 people, maybe two in the payload bay and 3 at the top up there. So, but other countries now have adopted basically a bell-shaped reentry module like Apollo was the command module, and Gemini was another one that had been a nice two-seater to get people quick access to space. But c'est la vie, that didn't happen up there. What did happen, and here's an interesting picture I did find of an astronaut, an Air Force astronaut, in the actual working area of the Mole laboratory. The Gemini spacecraft would be on the other side of that tunnel. And you notice the blue tint, of course, Air Force blue. Uh, and these were the spacesuits that they had trained in. There is the Gemini spacecraft, the one of a kind that was flown with the hole in the back of it there. Dave Stange mentions that he saw this. You notice the Air Force written on the side, a little bit scorched from the reentry there with the typical Air Force star and blue circle around it there. And there's Bob Crippen, and that is where the hatch would have been, up there, the dark area of the reentry there. Of course, configured the reentry ballistic wise so that it didn't, most of the force of the reentry plasma was not over that in there. And I'd say this is Bob probably about 40 years ago, Marty, because I saw Bob a couple of weeks ago at the Scholarship Foundation. He was looking good for sure. And but I think he's 87 years old. And Bob Crippen, thank you for all that you've done for the American Space Museum. He raised a lot of money for the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo monuments that we have just 3 blocks away from here. And I know you're going to be visiting them, our guest in here, Tom Celentano. So we got some good comments there. Cliff Watson, sorry you did miss it yesterday. You got to go and dream a genie there, buddy, on there. So I wonder how the Gemini spacecraft docked with the laboratory. Well, it didn't. It went up with the laboratory, okay, attached to it. There, Dean Babcock, as you see here in these pictures. It was all going up together as a second stage with the Titan boosting it up to the 20, 30-mile layer till the second stage took over and pumped it up there. Good question there. Hey, Doug Forrest, good to see you, Dougie. Send me some pictures of what Enterprise is looking like out there at the Los Angeles History Museum there. So I don't have a whole lot of slides here, just a lot of talk, I guess you could say there. But I have seen this several times myself, and it's quite interesting to think about what could have been. This is another big what could have been. Billions of dollars dumped into this program, just like the Dinosaur one-man spacecraft that had the profile of a mini shuttle, a reusable spacecraft. So this is a picture I took because I'd heard about it, but this is the Oklahoma City Science Museum, which is awesome. And it's right on Interstate 40. And I lived in Tennessee for 35 years on one side of Interstate 40 that goes right through the state of Tennessee. It takes 10 hours to get from where I was up in Bristol and Kingsport and Johnson City up there by Asheville, North Carolina, and the bordering with Virginia. But this museum's awesome, and once you go there, you go just another 40 miles west to Tom Stafford's fabulous Air and Space Museum. But this was a suit that was found in a locker out at Cape Canaveral. Like 20 years ago, somebody opened up an old locker there as they were decommissioning one of the launch pads, and out popped a couple big cases, and they opened up those cases, and there were some blue spacesuits in them, and the blue of the manned orbiting laboratory representing the Air Force there, and had the spacesuit glove there. I remember just staring at it, going, "Wow, nobody told me about this." Okay, I knew about the mole a little bit when I was out there. This would have been about 9, 10 years ago, and but the only one I've ever seen in captivity, and there only might be two of them left out there. Who knows what they did with the other ones that they were training with in there? So, and here is a picture of Crip next to that suit that somebody took of him. I think this is when they found it out at the Air Force. And there's the Titan rocket, okay, and you can see of what it would have launched up there. So obviously Bob Crippen, one of the astronauts there. You would also know Albert Cruz was one of these astronauts. You might not know about Albert, but he's in his 90s there on the left, and I understand he may have passed away this week, and I'm trying to verify that. But Al Cruz, God bless you. He was an Air Force major and was involved with the training for this. And I'm not sure who that's beside him facing us, but I think Al's there on the left. And but I did want to tell you some of the other astronauts involved as we're looking at Crip. Of course, I mentioned Navy Lieutenant Richard Truly was involved. Then Captain Air Force Captain Carol Bobko. Gordon Fullerton was part of this. I keep forgetting about that, and saw his wife Marie at the Astronaut Hall of Fame. And I'm going to call up Marie. I know her pretty well and like talking to her once in a while. I'm going to say, I've never talked to you about Gordo's mole career there. Henry Hartsfeld, another great early astronaut who's passed away in our shuttle program, and Robert Overmyer. In fact, the only one alive of Bobco, Crip, Fullerton, Hartsfield, and Overmyer is Crip. And also involved in this program was Robert Lawrence, the first African American chosen to be an astronaut back in the 1960s. Okay, and so why did it take us so long to get another person of color on the astronaut corps? And of course, Robert Lawrence never did fly. And Don Peterson was a early shuttle astronaut who segued from the mole, and he passed away about 7 years ago. I remember attending his wake. Like all these astronauts had childhood dreams of traveling to space. Little did they know that they were going to go possibly to a space laboratory that would be secret on there. So very fascinating chapter of American space history, the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. And I will have other shows on Stay Curious about this, as so many things were developed that were used in the space station and later in the space labs that were inside the cargo bay, and then of course the International Space Station. So let's see what you guys are talking to each other there, and that's great. How many of these labs were they going to build? It was a top secret. Okay, and we don't really know. Some people inside do know. Okay, and Marvel Luca, Empire 33 asked, do we have most of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo artifacts? We have some. Okay, and incredibly, what I've learned over the years of this is that they throw away so much stuff. Space history thrown away. Maybe like these mole blue uniforms are just tossed in the trash. We're not going to use them anymore. The program's over. I remember our godfather of the museum, Charlie Mars, who was a program manager on the Apollo, Space Station Freedom, and Vanderbilt. He's a graduate of Vanderbilt. Vandenberg, Slick 6 for the shuttle out there. He told me that when the Mercury program was done, they were told to just take those 4-drawer filing cabinets out to the dumpster. They were getting empty ones delivered the next day. All right, take out what you need to remember and throw away the rest. And can you imagine the space history that's in there? However, most of it was saved in one way or the other. And maybe we're glad about that because that escalates the prices of those Gemini manuals and so forth that we come across. So, Marty, any other comments or questions you see out there that we should pertain to the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, one chapter of the American space history that if you know a little bit about it, you truly are a space geek, in my opinion. Marty?
Mark, there's several comments from Amy Collins. You may want to go back and just read all hers, but the last one she just said, at the end of the mission, they had Rubbermaid trash barrels full of all kinds of flight data file documents dumped.
Absolutely,
several
Amy.
good comments.
Absolutely, Amy. I've seen some of your comments, and I'm glad she's talking about the interior was beefed up, ruggedized military look. Of course, this was an Air Force military thing. And maybe your first look, any of you, inside of a Gemini spacecraft, and mine was at the Neil Armstrong Museum in Wapakoneta, just 80 miles south of where I grew up on I-75 in Findlay, Ohio. I'm like, this looks like a jet fighter aircraft interior. Okay, it's not as there was toggle switches and an 8-ball there, like you see in airplanes for orientation, stuff like that. Not very Star Trekky or sci-fi in my mind, but this is where these astronauts came from, were military astronauts, because they were the test pilots. They were testing a spacecraft. And in fact, it's pretty well common knowledge now that after 135 shuttle launches, it was still an experimental spacecraft for its 30-year legacy. As they kept refining things, everything kept changing. That is sort of a definition of an experimental spacecraft, that you keep changing things to it and so forth. But boy, were those last 3 flying with very little changes and very little problems in the end there. Yes, Marty?
Yeah, Dean Babcock is asking, would the blueprints for Apollo have been destroyed?
That's a good question. Don't know. I've never seen any blueprints for Apollo. I think it's a shame that the construction stands and all the support equipment and so forth for the Saturn V rocket were all destroyed. Okay. I've seen some blueprints for the Apollo Saturn V, but I've not for the spacecraft. Marty, you were a lunar module electrical engineer. Did you see the blueprints that you worked off of? What were those like? And have you seen any of those come up in any of our 37 American Space Museum auctions? You're better to comment on that, Marty, than I am.
Yeah, the lunar module, I never saw blueprints at all. By the time the vehicle came to KSC, it was far beyond the blueprint stage. And even after that, I have not seen any blueprints.
What I've always seen a lot of is manuals and fold outs of manuals, electrical grids. Is that what you kind of worked off of, Marty? Not necessarily a blueprint, but a copy of your electrical tracings and so forth, or what was that like? Tell us.
No, not really, Mark. Again, when the vehicle came down to KSC, it was built. We had a lot of testing to do. Mainly testing. He had some installations, but it was all laid out. He just followed the OMI, which is the operational maintenance instructions, or TPS, technical process sheet. So it's all written out. I don't recall very many drawings, if you will. When I saw the pyro battery blankets, I had a drawing for that. But there wasn't a lot of drawings back at the launch pad, I'll say, at KSC.
And to Steve Jokums up there at his Lake County Spaceport, that's why they cannot produce F1 engines, and that's true. And we did several programs with Mr. Lee Solid. God bless him. He passed away about 2 years ago. Lee did 3 or 4 shows with us. You want to see some fascinating engine talk from the godfather of all the engines on the Saturn V rocket, all 33 3 of them, I think they were including the hypergolic simple engine on the lunar module ascent. He bemoaned the fact that they kind of had to start from scratch. However, he was pretty proud of that SSME engine, the RS-25, that's now part of Artemis, and how they were reusable and reusable all the time in there. Yes, we and just to mention to this other person here, we don't talk sex, politics, or religion there, Mr. Stephen, on there. So appreciate that you curb your remarks on that. That's not appropriate for this program today, sir. So, yeah, what a chapter of history. As you can see, it brings forth all kinds of comments and questions about people there wanting to know more 50 years later after these events have happened. So that's always what fascinates me. 12 years after the last shuttle landed, people can't get enough of our presenters that talk about the shuttle history there. So, well, thank you all for enjoying the mole. Wish I would have had Marcus Wendt here. Maybe that will happen. We're going to try to get Alex Carl, the ESA Eurocom, on here on there. Tom, did you have any questions while you're sitting over there? All right. He's going to ask us privately there, I guess, on there. So, well, let's segue from that to just to look, gotta just say, you know, when the moon's in the sky like a big pizza pie, that's amore, right? According to Dean Martin saying that, all right? And so we do have a full moon on this says the 11th. It's like technically 1 in the morning on the 11th. So tonight you're going to see the moon rise like a big pizza pie in the sky. And when you outstretch your arm, you can cover it up with your little finger always, all right? And it's no super moon, it's no super duper moon. It is the strawberry moon, okay? And this is named by the Algonquin tribe in North America, as many Native American tribes in America where we live, and of course Canada adopts the same thing. They gave a name to the moon that was appropriate for what was going on around their surroundings. And right now, you all up in the north are gorging yourselves with delicious strawberries. Guess what? We were doing that in late March and April, Marty. The strawberry season here. And a big festival over in Lakeland area by St. Pete. Over by Tampa area. Just huge back in. And so I've had my fill of strawberries already, but would love to eat a big crate of them right now on there. But that's the strawberry moon. It's called other things too. The May moon was the flower moon. And July full moon is called the buck moon because amorous bucks and does, amorous bucks were competing for the does in the month of July. So and you see the sturgeon moons ahead of us in August, and the corn moon and harvest moon, beaver moon and cold moon. So you get the drift there of why these things were named what they were named there. And so we have to, you're going to see the moon wherever you're at. Go out and get you some moonshine over the next few days. Like I say, it's the kind of moonshine that you can't get too much of. All right. But a little interesting, we just had the celebration of D-Day. Hope that you all honored our American veterans on June 6th, the great invasion called Operation, I had it on the tip of my tongue. Someone's going to tell me what the D-Day invasion led by Eisenhower was called. Operation, Overlord. Before Steve Jokums could spit it out, it's Operation Overlord, okay? And, yep, R.G. Jubilee asked if John Young was alive, and nope, he's been gone for 7 years as Steve Jokums. But always we remember him every day that you watch news from Orlando, because there's some wreck or something happening on the John Young Parkway. John Young, born in San Francisco, grew up in Orlando. which is pretty cool considering, he spent the rest of his life between Houston and Kennedy Space Center uh, on 6 missions, the astronaut's astronaut on there. So, and we'll get to that there in just a second. Carlton Bailey says he's got his cameras set up for the big launch at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, this is called Wikipedia, okay? And on June 6, 1944, the moon was full. Now, not Wikipedia, I'm sorry, Stellarium. Think aquarium, stellar for stars. And you can download this app on your phone or your computer at home. It was one of the first very elaborate planetarium programs for astronomers to use, amateur astronomers, to find their faint fuzzies. And you've got other things on your phone, whatever, if you're Android, Microsoft, whatever you are, Apple, you can find an app for that. And it's a time machine. And you can go back and see what planets were up. What was the moon like when you were born? And I did this for June 6, 1944, and the moon was rising. And this was part of Eisenhower's plan. It was actually rising in Scorpius. That's the bright star Antares to its left. And Scorpio is very easy to see. It's like a fish hook in the sky. And so this was something that they wanted low tide, and they wanted the moonlight out there. Now, there was some controversy on that, particularly if you're a paratrooper, because being seen in the moonlight, as this photograph was taken on Normandy Beach, you can get the gist with a time exposure here that the moon was bright enough to illuminate some of the targets there. Now, that's a positive thing on both sides, okay? Nazi Germany and the Americans coming in. But that's when they did it, and they wanted low tide, so it was easier for the troops to get in there in this cargo carrier there. So very few of you veterans alive from that infamous day, but if you are, God bless you and all you stand for, because this was a monumental turn in the war. D-Day in June 1944 done underneath there. And to just lighten up the mood here a little bit, Mark Usiak photographed the moon a couple days ago at an air show. And Mark is an awesome photographer and has really got a knack for the juxtaposition of things. As he saw the moon in the sky, maybe he saw this biplane with its on purpose smoke trail coming out of there, and said, if I just stand over here a little bit to the right, maybe that moon's going to be right there in this beautiful shot, Mark. And that's a good way for us to end the show and say, Thursday, we're going to have Bert Dicht on the phone, who's the National Space Society director of their publication Ad Astra. He's the membership director for NSS. And he does a podcast once a month, and we're going to have Bert on the show here to talk about what he's up to. And he's going to have Mark and Tom Usiak, space photographers, on a special presentation of their space forum at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, Behind the Lens. Dun, 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 dun. And these guys, there's put together 2 other colleagues, Bob Preston and Steve Nolte. Okay, not Nick Nolte, but Steve Nolte. I've not met Bob, but I've met Steve. He was at Shuttlefest. Many of you met Steve at Shuttlefest, and they perfected an awesome technique with their remote cameras and their Hasselblad cameras there, and they're going to share a little about that. So tune in, and you don't have to be a member of the National Space Society to watch it. Yes, Marty?
Yeah, Robert Law is saying moon is in the same position as D-Day tonight. It's in Scorpio. It's very low south horizon.
Robert Law, thanks for that information. It is a very low full moon. The weird, our tilt of our Earth's axis at 24.5 degrees makes the moon. Sometimes you'll go, it's full moon, but boy, 2 months ago it was way up high, and now it's kind of low down there. And this is all about the celestial mechanics of where we are in relationship to our orbit and the moon and so forth. So, Robert, that's very cool that we've got there. Yes, Marty.
Yeah, Dean Babcock is asking, where can we watch the program? And it's Dave Stang is saying, is that presentation free to view? I'm an NSS member.
Well, it's like my program, our program here, Dave Stange. It's priceless. Okay. He agreed, Tom Celentano. We're priceless here. It's not, but no, it is free. You go to the National Space Society website, and they will have a link there for you. And I will put that link up on our Facebook page tomorrow, and definitely when Bert is here on there. So Dave said he just downloaded the app there. So and thank you, Jim McDade. He's complimenting my wardrobe here. And of course, I've got the greatest logo of all, the Grumman blue and gold there. And thank you, Marty Winkle, for getting me one of these shirts. This was the last hurrah for the lunar module workers and their beloved astronauts, and particularly Fred O'Hays on Apollo 13 here. So thank you, my friend, and we're so glad that Jim has found us, because he lives in Huntsville, Alabama, where, you know, I've been many times there. When I was in Tennessee, I gave talks in Chattanooga, about 3 hours down I-75 from, I go 40 and then down 75 from the Tri-Cities, and then go through that wandering road to Huntsville, about an hour and a half drive, and you go into Tennessee, then you go into Georgia, then you go back into Tennessee and back into Georgia on the road over there. And but Jim McDade appreciates you spreading the American Space Museum love wherever you go there. And he's also one of the first contributors on Space Hipsters there that Emily Carney started in 1911 or 2011, I think, is when Emily started that Space Hipsters. I found them at when they were about 3,000, 4,000, and now they're hitting 70,000 people on that. So, yes, Marty.
Marvel Luca Empire 33 is asking, wait a minute. Oh, have any astronauts have also been Air Force Thunderbirds or Navy Blue Angels?
And I see Mitch Rothman answered that Bill Pogue was a Thunderbird. Okay. And I've seen the Blue Angels several times and the Thunderbirds, and I did look up to see if there are any Blue Angel astronauts, and I couldn't find any. And the late Bill Pogue, who had a crewed flight on Skylab 2, was it? But someone will correct me on that, and that's immaterial. He was a Skylab astronaut on there. So, anyway, that's our show for today. And Tom Celentano usually shouting out to you and thanking you for watching. And here he is sitting in our studios here in the American Space Museum. Hope you've enjoyed the things that you've seen refreshed in our gallery. And we hope that, Tom, that you enjoy your liftoff tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning, when Axiom 4 and Peggy Whitson and these 3 rookies are going to space. That will make 636 humans have orbited the Earth in all eternity. So thank you all for watching today. We'll rack it up and do it again tomorrow, hopefully maybe with an ESA astronaut, maybe with Alex Carl, but definitely you're invited. And as we say, it's priceless, so come on board and enjoy Stay Curious with me, Mark Marquette. And I can't wait to see you, like Tom Celentano sitting over here in our museum, to bridge the space between us.